Street in West Warwick so they can control the traffic as firefighters are trying to battle this huge mill fire. Now, our own Tony Petrarca, who grew up in the West Warwick area, is at the scene. He joins us now by telephone. Tony.
Karen, I'm about 100 yards away from this mill fire. I'm told it's an abandoned mill, what used to be the Triangle Print Works, which is on Route 115 in the Phenix section in Warwick. A large number of West Warwick apparatus here on the scene right now, and the fire is completely out of control. It's about a 4 or 5 story building, all levels engulfed in flames, smoke and embers shooting hundreds of feet in the...
News Chopper 12 as we're over West Warwick. Now, this mill is near the intersections of Route 115 and Route 33. Our Eyewitness News reporter Dennis Protzko is in Chopper 12. Dennis, can you hear me?
Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
Want to know what you're seeing now from the air. It's a huge fire as we're looking at these pictures.
Absolutely. Just pulling up in the area right now, as you can see, very, very heavy flames, fire surrounding this building completely. Again, as you mentioned, this is the Triangle Printing Mill here in West Warwick. We understand the fire is on Main Street between Fairview and Phenix. As you can see, as we push in tight, you can see a number of the walls here at the mill have already collapsed. A number of the walls actually collapsing on top of power lines onto the street, and that has at least 4 or 5, as we understand, power lines and power telephone poles down in the street as well. So again, the power company is coming out to this fire. They're going to need to shut off the fire. A number of the walls, as I mentioned, have collapsed. The ceiling is completely, or the roof, we should mention, has completely collapsed. You can see the outstanding wall there to the left and to the right, and just basically a box here of a building left already. This is a very, very fast-moving fire. Broke out just before 7, and as you can see, this has already completely gutted this large mill building here on Main Street here in West Warwick. Karen?
Dennis, these are unbelievable pictures. Can you give us some perspective as how far out you are right now with the chopper as you're moving in on this?
We're just pulling up into the area right now, so we're only about a half mile away. As we pull out really wide and show you just the flames coming up and the smoke coming up, basically lighting up the entire neighborhood. Again, we can have, we show you a number of the mutual aid fire departments here on scene. Of course, West Warwick is here, but Warwick has responded along with Cranston. Providence has even shown up. Coventry from the southwest has just arrived as well. So a number of companies here in the area. Again, moving back to the fire, you can just see it raging in all quadrants here of the area of the fire here along this mill. You can see the fire just pushing through all of the windows. Again, that's a 4-story building, or it was a 4-story building. Very, very large complex. Fire throughout at this point, raging out of control. At this point, just a defensive operation. You can see the firefighters trying to throw water here up on the fire. They're off on the side here. And again, they're all scattered around this building at all different angles, trying to get as much water up on top of this building as possible. But at this point, you can see it's basically out of control and just raging.
Now, Dennis, you were with us back in 2003 with the Pawtucket Mill fire, and there was that concern of that wind had picked up so fiercely and it was blowing embers into nearby homes, causing a number of fires around the neighborhood. Are you witnessing anything like that from the air at this hour?
Well, luckily we have fairly light winds this evening, nothing compared to what we had in the Pawtucket Mill fire. Of course, we had winds gusting 40 to 45 miles an hour, of course, blowing those embers and fire flames all over the place, and of course igniting those nearby homes. Nothing like that today. You can see the smoke basically rising almost straight up into the air, and the flames not affecting here any of the nearby homes. You can actually see a church nearby across the street, a couple of houses across the street as well. This is bordered by a small river here, so there's a natural barrier between the fire and of course these nearby homes. And on this side, not much. A couple of homes here, again separated by the river, as you can see in the area. So again, the fire raging here, but basically not like the Pawtucket fire. The smoke and fire basically raising straight up into the air. Not a problem for the nearby homes so far.
Okay, thank you. That's Dennis Protzko reporting for us from News Chopper 12. An incredible mill fire in West Warwick tonight. Of course, we'll have further updates for you throughout the evening.
For a sudden piece of
your screen there, you can see Main Street as it runs right in front of this this complex, this very large mill complex. This is the triangle printing mill. It has been abandoned for at least the last 10 years, and a number of live wires are actually down in the street, causing even bigger problems here for the firefighters. We're just listening to some of the communications on the ground. As we widen out and show you again this house, you can see that this hand line has actually been put down on the ground. They are now throwing water up onto this house. We understand that the vinyl siding on some of these houses nearby is actually melting from the extreme heat here due to this very, very large mill fire. At this point, we have no reported injuries, either to civilians or firefighters in the area. But again, obviously, the West Warwick Fire Department, along with a number of surrounding towns, have their hands completely filled with this huge fire raging tonight here in West Warwick on Main Street.
Dennis, you can certainly understand the heat that must be generated by this incredible fire. If you could pull back a little bit, can you show us once again how the firefighters are just trying to get some water on this mill?
Absolutely. We're going to widen out here fully here, and you can see that they're basically in a defensive posture at this point. You can see a number of the hand lines here in the area, and also a number of the tower trucks a good 50 yards away or so. You can see a number of those. These are some of the fire units here to the north end of the building. You can see that this tower ladder is up and shooting water onto the fire. But again, they're basically in a defensive posture, not getting anywhere close to this fire, just letting it rage. And at this point, they're just trying to put as much water from a defensive posture as possible onto the flames. But again, the biggest concern here is the live wires that are down. Also, the danger of collapse. You can see the front of the
embers carried by the wind that had been floating off to some nearby property. Some neighbors were evacuated nearby. Some homes were emptied out near there as a precaution. And as you can imagine, a number of spectators have started flooding that area to take a look at this spectacular scene. I saw some other angles of this, and it almost appeared as if a volcano had exploded in the middle of West Warwick. That's what it looked like from some other angles. But this is a pretty good angle from our satellite truck, and you can see the water being sprayed on there intermittently. It's, as far as we know, a 3-alarm fire. We have no reports of any injuries. And you know, if you look at that picture, you could see toward the top the embers shooting up there. Our contact with the fire department, they're calling it a defensive attack right now, and we'll get a little more specific from them when they hold a news conference a little later tonight. Several communities have been called in. We know there are firefighters from Coventry and Cranston, and they've been there, I guess, we're coming up on a little more than an hour now. Once again, you're looking at a fire in the northwest section of West Warwick, in between the Clyde and the Harris sections. The exact address, as far as we know from the police, is 771 Main Street. That'd be the intersection of 115 and Phenix Avenue. That's the northwest section of that community. You're about a half a mile from Coventry, about a mile and a half from Cranston from those lines. Earlier, our photographer on the scene said he actually saw part of that building collapse. This is near the Patuxent River. Many of these old mills back up to rivers. They were built so long ago. Some of them have oil-soaked floors. This is so typical of a New England scene. From that time and again, from now, you know, from every so often we get mill fires in our area, and they all seem to resemble one another. This is almost a mirror of what we had in Woonsocket a little while ago, and then a mirror of what we had in Pawtucket a little while ago, and now this one in West Warwick. You'll want to stay away from that section of West Warwick tonight. Avoid it, because it's jammed with police vehicles and rescue vehicles and spectators. Before we say goodnight, or at least for now, stay away from Phenix Ave and Main Street. That's where this major mill fire continues to burn. More news coming up throughout the night. Back to programming.
I don't know.
Tow is on the ground, been gathering information about this fire tonight, and we think that we're able to take you to him right now. Walt.
This is the Phoenix Square area of West Warwick. I'll get out of the way, and you can see we're at the corner of Main and Highland, and the plume of smoke burning just behind it. It actually changed colors just recently to a less orange hue, which could mean that they might be getting control of at least part of the fire. You can see some sparks rising pretty high, at least 5 stories in the air, because that's how big this mill complex was. Let's take another look at News Chopper 12 right now. Live pictures from the sky. You can see how big big this complex was, 5 stories high, a sprawling complex. It was vacant, and right now there are no reports of injuries, but we can tell you that there were plans to turn this mill complex into some condominiums. In fact, the first stage of that project had already gotten underway. That part of the project, though, unaffected by the fire right now. This used to be Scott Laboratories back in the early 90s. It was some sort of a print outfit at that point. It closed down, and like many mills in southern New England, it was vacant for a while. And of course, like all mill fires, inside these mills, plenty of floorboards soaked in oil from years of machinery in the mill complexes. That's why they burn so strongly, as southern New Englanders know. We can tell you again that, as you can see, and from that view perhaps, you can tell that that is perhaps where we heard that the roof collapsed. We heard that on the scanner. And again, we hear now, while it says a 3-alarm fire, we hear this has gone to a 4-alarm fire situation. We have a truck from Providence on the scene. We also think there is mutual aid from nearby Coventry. Fire trucks going at it, trying to put this thing out. But as is with most mill fires, tough to put out. What they really want to do is just control it, keep it under control, and keep it from spreading into nearby houses. We also hear that there was at least 1 home evacuated. Another home nearby had steam coming from it, indicating it was starting to heat up a bit. But at this point, the fire does not look to be in control. The goal of these firefighters is to, no doubt, just try to keep it from spreading to any nearby structures. But as you look at that picture right there, you can tell that the fire has pretty much spread throughout this sprawling mill complex that, again, was Scott Laboratories back in the 90s, was going to be converted into condominiums. That project obviously not going to happen at this point. We'll cover this all night. We have team coverage, and we'll come back tonight at 10 and 11. For now, we'll send it back to you.
Walt, if you can stand by for just one quick second, we have a couple questions for you. First, you mentioned that a house had been possibly evacuated. We've learned here that the destination for evacuees is the senior center in West Warwick. Just from what you can see right there, would you expect that there might be other buildings that are in danger?
From my first viewpoint of this fire about an hour ago, I can tell you it did not look like there were homes directly next to the mill complex. There were some things across the street, but I can tell you that between the structures across the street and the mill complex, there were fire trucks. So at that point, I would think that those trucks were pretty much, or the trucks were pretty much keeping the structures safe.
Well, I understand that the intensity of the heat of this mill fire has melted the siding or affected the siding on some of the homes there.
Karen, ask that question again, please.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about how intense this heat is, and they were referring to that maybe some of the homes, that the heat has actually melted the siding on some of the homes. Have they talked about that?
Well, we did hear that some of the homes were steaming, literally steaming. And at that point, I had not heard that siding had melted yet, but we did hear that some of the homes were steaming. Of course, the next step from steaming could very well be that the siding would melt.
All right, well, you continue to stand by there. Now, a couple of years ago, the Pawtucket fires presented a complex challenge for firefighters because of the excessive winds there. They relied on chopper video to give them an indication of just where the embers were going. We've got Eyewitness News reporter Dennis Protzko up in News Chopper 12, who can give us a perspective from where he sits. Dennis?
And Steve, a raging fire here, no doubt, here in West Warwick. Again, this mill fire broke out somewhere between 6:30 and 7 at this point. It's basically a shell of a building. That's all that's left here. Of course, the ceiling has completely come down. The roof of this building crashing story to story to story all the way down to the ground, at least a 4-story plus building here. And as we widen out and show you the complete view here of this sprawling complex, just fire in all quadrants, in all areas. You're looking at the north face along Main Street here of this former mill building. Here as we push in and we show you the eastern area here of portion of the building that has already collapsed. You can see the fire still coming up, the very, very heavy smoke, and of course the water from a tower ladder right off to the left side of your screen there, trying to pour water here onto the fire. Now, at this point, a defensive operation all around. All firefighters can do is throw the water from a good distance, 50 yards or more away from this fire, onto the walls of this former mill complex. You can see that some of these very heavy lines, these are called master streams, which are very heavily charged lines here from the other side of the street, other side of Main Street actually, as they throw the water back up onto this building. So again, they're having trouble getting water up on top of the fire. At this point, a defensive operation, just letting the fire burn itself out inside the confines of these walls of this former mill building. At this point, they cannot get inside. Obviously, you wouldn't want to get inside. So again, a defensive operation. The biggest problem we've seen so far is a number of power lines here and power poles right in front of the building. In fact, here, as you can see one silhouetted right here. These are one of the power lines. We have noticed that a number of them have been sparking or arcing. And we understand that a number of power lines have actually gone down onto the street due to some of the collapsing bricks and whatnot from this building. So again, power problem is one of the problems here in the area, keeping firefighters at a good distance away from this building. Another problem, of course, just the heavy flames and heavy smoke. Of course, the heat from the fire. At this point, mutual aid from a number of towns. As Walt has mentioned, as far away as Providence at this point, coverage from stations around the area. And of course, this is beginning to darken down just a little bit as, again, the ceilings and, of course, the upper floors here of this building completely collapsed and crashing down to the ground. So again, not much left to work with, just the outer shell here of the building. You can see we're still waiting for this partial wall has come down here, as well as the bell tower to the left of your screen right there as well. So again, at this point, they're just looking for collapses and keeping their distance away from this fire and this huge complex.
Dennis, I know the mill sits along the Patuxent, backs up to the Patuxent River. Have you seen any of the firefighters, the pumper trucks, taking any water out of that river to help battle this blaze?
At this point, we've been mostly concentrating on the fire. As we widen out further, we can show you down the street. There's a number of units here in the area. We haven't focused in too much on them. Here's where the river runs beneath them. We can't really tell. It's a little bit on the dark side here, but we haven't heard that they've actually been drawing water from the river. That is a possibility. We haven't heard actually of any water problems up to this point. They seem to have a good flow of water getting to the fire, so that hasn't been a problem thus far. But of course, as the night wears on, that could indeed become a problem. Water issues could become part of the problem here. As far as we know so far, they're doing a good job of getting water to the fire and at least up on top of the fire. But as you can see, it's not doing much good. Of course, this fire well out of control as far as the building goes, a complete loss, completely gutted.
You pointed out those power lines, Dennis, and in 2003, the Pawtucket Mill fire resulted in several neighborhoods being temporarily without power. No reports of that so far, but I'm curious, just from a practical standpoint, in that chopper, what does the difference in temperature do to you as a pilot in making sure that the pilot has a safe vantage point there?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually a little bit to the north of the fire. You can see that the smoke is billowing up and drifting basically towards the out to the west, and it's not causing a problem as far as us. As far as down below, of course, that's a bigger problem. We can actually smell the smoke from up here. When we are flying in towards the area, we could smell the smoke. And as far as heat goes, we're not affected as long as we're not directly over the fire, so that's not a problem. Of course, as you were mentioning, the Pawtucket Mill fire, the nasty winds that we had that night, gusting well over 30 to 40 miles an hour. That was a big problem as far as we went, as far as we were concerned. That was causing major updrafts for us. But as far as the fire danger from down below, as far as we're concerned, not much of a problem.
Dennis, as you pull out there, can you kind of just describe the neighborhood around this mill for us, for people certainly not familiar with that area of West Warwick?
Absolutely, yep. And again, this is Main Street, as we mentioned, basically between the area of Fairview and Phenix. A little bit dark to see, but you can see some houses here in the bottom of your corner of your screen, right across the street. These are some of the neighborhood houses. There's a number of them directly across the street. Of course, these houses that are in the immediate area have been evacuated. We also know that there's a church not very far, right up the street, in fact, and I believe this is the church. It's hard to see here. Again, pretty dark down there, but you can see the outline of that church. And you can see that the power, at least to this street, has been cut off, but directly behind that, just to the north, you can see that some of the street lights are still on in this area. So again, as we widen out further, you can see the fire come into view to the top right-hand of your screen. And the neighborhood, at least along Main Street, the street portion directly in front of the mill, that power has been turned off. But again, the surrounding community, it still appears that we do have power working in that area. So again, just the power out on Main Street itself directly in front of the mill. And of course, the number of houses directly across the street from the mill have been evacuated. The other side of the building, that is bordered by, again, the river. And then, of course, we have a neighborhood that is in no danger of, again, a dark picture here, but you can see the outline of some of those houses right there. Those are not in danger so far of any type of fire breaching across the river into the woods. In fact, they're separated by at least 150 yards or so of woods. So far, that's not a problem. The rear complex here, the southern portion of this complex, you can see the heavy fire right there, and of course the trees right behind it. So far, they have not been infected. In fact, you can actually see the river right there. That's the water running past the back of this complex. Again, that's the south side of this complex. Again, so we have a river and some woods, about 150 yards at least of woods, and then another community on the opposite side. So far, they have not been affected.
All right, Dennis, you'll continue to gather pictures there, and we want to just recap what's going on for those who are just tuning in at 8:30 here tonight on WPRI. Eyewitness News on the scene of a massive mill fire. It is in West Warwick. It began sometime after 6:30 tonight. Firefighters initially seemed to have some control of the fire, but as you can see, it clearly got to a point where, for safety's sake, firefighters stepped back. The fire is running its course. There's been some evacuations of nearby homes. No injuries to report that we know of at this time. People are being evacuated to the senior center in West Warwick, and we're getting information from many different sources. You just heard Dennis Protzko. He is our Eyewitness News reporter in News Chopper 12. Walt Buteau reported from the ground just a few moments ago. Tony Petrarca, who's a lifelong resident of Rhode Island and this particular area, reported to us about an hour ago. And we have Eyewitness News viewers who are bringing us information, and they're looking at some of that information right now, sent to us via the internet. These are pictures taken from the scene by Eyewitness News viewers. And now back to chopper video. The video has been on the scene for well over an hour now, showing you the difference from the very beginning. First of all, it's bright red and orange, as Walt Buteau initially reported to us, and there was a roof at the beginning of our broadcast. The roof is now fallen in, as you can see, and as Dennis was pointing out, the frame of this once large mill is about ready to fall in at this hour.
That wraps up our coverage right now. Breaking news of that mill fire in West Warwick. Of course, you will have more on Fox Providence tonight at 10, and again on Eyewitness News at 11. See you then.
For more on this breaking story, stay with Eyewitness News or log on to our website, WPRI.com.
So, what's new with you? Now you can lease an